What is up, everyone? I got another mix set for all the SNS hunters out there. This set is all about raw damage. This set might be the meta for SNS as of right now. I have been experimenting with different armor pieces and weapons, but this is the best I have to offer at the moment. If you just care about DPS, this is a set for you. Now let's get into it. So here's the equipment you're going to need. The SNS we are going with is the Narga SNS, and we went with attack boost for the Rampage skill. Now this was a tough decision between this SNS and the Diablos SNS. The Diablos SNS has higher raw damage, but the Narga SNS has more affinity. You get one level 2 slot for a decoration, and you start off with white sharpness. Now I have done a lot of testing between the two, and it's really close. The trend I noticed was with the Narga SNS is that it is a little inconsistent in terms of damage, but you have more opportunity to deal more raw damage because of how much affinity you have to deal more critical hits. With this set, if you are hitting a weak spot of a monster, you have an 80% chance of dealing a critical hit. Not bad at all. However, you are hoping to deal critical hits because the damage you get from dealing critical hits justifies using this SNS over the Diablos SNS. With the Diablo SNS, the damage is more consistent and you are not necessarily relying on critical hits to deal damage. Again, it's really close, and if I had to choose one, I'm going with the Narga SNS because I am satisfied with having an 80% chance of landing a critical hit, and as long as we're landing critical hits, we are barely edging out the Diablos SNS in terms of damage. Now let's talk about the armor we are using. First we have the Bear Off helmet, and with this piece you get one level 2 slot and one level 1 slot for the decorations. For the skills you get one level of attack boost, one level of defense boost, and one level of offensive guard. Next we have the Remobra suit, which gives us 2 level 1 slots for decorations, and for the skills we get 1 level of critical boost. Next we have the Rathalos braces, which gives us 1 level 2 slot for decorations, and for the skills we get 2 levels of attack boost. Next we have the Scalda Elytra for the waist, and this gives us no slots for decorations, but we get 2 levels of weakness exploit, which is huge. Next we have the Golden Hakama for the legs, and this gives us 2 level 1 slots for decorations, and we get 2 levels of critical boost and 1 level of Latin power for the skills. Lastly, we are using a talisman that gives us 1 level 2 slot for decorations and 1 level of weakness exploit for the skills. So with this set, your total amount of decorations are 4 level 2 slots and 5 level 1 slots. Now let's talk about the total amount of skills we get with decorations attached. The decorations I went with are 4 attack jewels, 3 stamina thief jewels, and 2 free meal jewels. One thing to note is for level 1 slots, you can go with any skill you want. I just prefer stamina thief and free meal because I personally like those skills. However, I prefer adding a flinch free decoration if you are going to play multiplayer, just so you aren't constantly getting knocked down by your teammates. So starting off with our first skill, we get level 7 attack boost, which is going to improve our raw attack damage the highest we can. Next we have level 3 critical boost, which is going to give us a 40% damage boost when dealing critical hits. Next we have level 3 weakness exploit, which is going to give us a 50% boost in affinity when attacking weak spots. Next we have level 3 stamina thief, which is going to help us exhaust the monsters faster. Next we have level 2 free meal, which allows us to use an item for free 25% of the time, and for what it's worth, we get level 1 Latin power, which when active will give us a 10% increase in affinity and reduces our stamina depletion by 30%. For those who don't know, in order for Latin power to activate, you need to take 180 damage or after 5 minutes have passed. It will last for 2 minutes, and once done, the 5-minute timer will refresh itself. Then we have level 1 offensive guard, which will temporarily give us a 5% boost in attack damage when executing a perfectly timed block. And finally we have level 1 defense boost, which improves our defense value by 5. In conclusion, am I saying this is a meta? No, but I would say this is pretty damn close. Now I recently got a talisman that gives 2 levels of weakness exploit, so I have to do more experimenting with that talisman, and I will for sure update you guys if anything changes. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you have any questions, please let me know because I am here to help. I do stream here on YouTube weekly, so come hang with your boy, and I got more videos on the way, so stay tuned for those. I hope everyone has a good day, and until next time guys.